keep it entertaining, and give you a walk-away message. So we left off last year with the start of the airlines. And so I thought it would be very appropriate to pick up where we stopped last year and take it from luxury to Lemmings.
Is this the finish of the airline?
So this is getting us from when flying used to be fun and cool and really an experience, to where it is now a very negative experience and you dread traveling by air. Okay? And if nobody believes that, remember the good old days. Lots of leg room. Look at how nicely dressed everybody is when they travel. And if you will notice, that young lady right there is introducing you to the new Polaroid land camera and taking your picture. But look at that leg room. I mean, that was flying when flying was flying.
That's not a whole picture. That was from Pan Am.
That's Pan Am.
No, that picture's from the show Pan Am.
Yeah, but that's Pan Am.
That's what it looked like.
Isn't that great? That's the way it should be. Now, the only difference is we have removed the food. You got to bring it on yourself, right? But we all can relate to this, and the question comes, how do we go from that to this? Okay? And the answer is Gary Larson had it right. We're all a bunch of lemmings. We all like to herd together. We all follow somebody in the crowd. We'll do whatever it does. How many of you arrive at the airport early because you're concerned about getting through security? All right? But in reality, security statistics from TSA say it takes you 20 minutes to get through. I don't know if you can believe it or not, but it says 20 minutes. Okay? But if you'll notice, there's one lemming up there that's got a life preserver on. And the reason that that lemming has a life preserver on is there are still lemmings on the planet today. We could go a different transportation route and go the route of trains. All right? So if you want to go on a train ride, you can go over to India. When your population is growing like it is, you have to deal with transportation in a different way. Well, this is the way it is right now. Okay? So shoot me, stuff me, feed me, and fly me, and that's the experience that each one of us now experiences every time you get on the airplane. Let's go back a little bit in history and see how we got to that case. First of all, in 1927, after hauling mail for many, many years and deciding it was safe, the FAA, at that time the CAA, blessed an airline operation from New York to Boston. And it wasn't shortly after that that Lindbergh flew across the Atlantic and opened up the possibility of transcontinental flight. All right? In October of 1927, Pan Am started Miami to Havana service. Pan Am was really smart. What were they after? They were after the passengers on the boats because they could beat them. And you could get down to Havana, you could gamble, you could have fun, you could have sin. Remember, this is before Las Vegas. And you could get back in the same night. What an opportunity. So Pan Am looked at how I can move people that are currently being moved by ship faster, better, more convenient, and more luxurious. And then, just to throw in a couple of twists, for those of you who are in the environmental game, the first recorded noise complaint was in 1928. The hens weren't producing as many chickens because of overflights of aircraft, right? And then in May of 1930, we had our first flight attendant. She was actually a stewardess by the name of Helen Church, and she was on a flight that kicked off this whole concept of having somebody in the back of the airplane who was there to cater to your needs. Only nurses need apply. Again, more luxury, more comfort, more faith in being able to travel aboard an airplane. Along comes Pan Am, and Pan Am has been very successful along the Havana route, and they decide, okay, where's the next market to steal passengers away from the ships? And that was San Francisco to Hawaii. Notice that they flew the Pan Am Clipper ship. Not by accident. Also, you notice in the ads, the ship looks larger than life. It really wasn't that big, folks. But this whole concept of luxury was there. Why spend 3 days going to Hawaii when you can fly in a day? You realize the Pan Am Clipper only flew at 9,000 feet. So you got a lot of great scenery as you got there. And Juan Trippe innovated this whole concept under Pan Am of going after that market that was currently occupied by ships, just like the airlines of today went after the market to steal people away from trains following World War II. And so there was the whole Clipper story. He created a consortium that actually led to the formation of the Boeing 707. I'm going to talk about that later. We moved to 1935, and now the Pan Am Clipper is not only flying to Hawaii, but they're beginning to pursue other flights and other opportunities throughout Asia and throughout South America. And in 1937, they took off from San Francisco to go to Manila and do Hong Kong and look at additional markets for the Clipper. Big deal, a lot of advertisement, took passengers along the way. Everybody had a good time, great party. The big contender for stealing the cruise line or the ship market over the transatlantic was the Hindenburg and the Graf Zeppelin. And the only problem was that that particular mechanism of travel ended at Lakehurst in a very tragic accident. And that was really the end of the concept of an airship in order to move people between the two continents. And so on December 2nd, 1941, the date is really important here, Pan Am decides we're going around the world. We're going to demonstrate that we can be an intercontinental airline and take the Clipper around the world. And if it hadn't have been for December 7th, Pan Am would have launched itself as a major airline to serve that market. But as bad luck would have it, the war broke out. But there were some good things that happened relating to the war. First of all, the private finally got into an airplane and actually flew. Prior to World War II, very, very few people in this world ever got on an airplane. Okay? The second thing was nurses went off to war and they flew. It was safe to allow women to fly. Women took jobs in defense industries they never had before, including the opportunity to actually fly and deliver airplanes, and there were a lot of women pilots associated with the WASP program. So it was really an interesting leveler of male and female participation in aviation. When the GIs returned, they had the GI Bill. What did they do? They went to college, they formed businesses, and suddenly we face what you're experiencing today, this wonderful time compression. You don't have enough time to get on a train and take 3 days to go between New York and LA. So suddenly a new market is showing up called time travel that is more efficient and faster. And it was just too long to go, and flying was the way to go. Well, if you look at the wartime problem, the problem you had there is the flights were few and far between. They were on old-time aircraft. They were rickety operations. The safety record wasn't very good, and it cost you a lot of money to fly during the war. And then along came, at the end of the war, the Constellation, known affectionately as the Connie. I actually had the experience of flying the Connie, and this was the commercial flight, pressurized aircraft, flight level 240, get above the weather, wonderful interiors, lots of room, lots of luxury. A little interesting piece of history, one of the designers of the Connie was Kelly Johnson, who went on to design the U-2, the SR-71, the Skunk Works operation with Lockheed Martin. This was a tremendous aircraft that stayed in service a very, very long time. Okay? But this set the standard of luxury in the cabin, and this set the standard of service. This cockpit layout here is actually a Lufthansa layout for an aircraft that flied up to 1979. Okay? But the Connie was a great, great opportunity, recognized 1947, 45. In 1952, BOAC introduced the Comet. And here was an opportunity of an all-jet transcontinental flight. The only problem was the Connie flew in 52 and died shortly thereafter, after a series of very big fatal accidents where the traveling public walked away from jet aircraft. And the biographers of both Juan Trippe from Pan Am and Bill Boeing both report a luncheon date that they had in New York. At that time, Bill Boeing was on the board of directors of Pan Am, and the two of them figured out that they had to do something to deal with the Comet accidents, and they had to capture the transcontinental market, and that was the birth of the Boeing 707. And so what they did was they took the Boeing 367-80, which was going to be the KC-135, and converted that airplane into a passenger-carrying airplane. All the luxury you could ever want in a 707. So they entered service in 58. Douglas couldn't be in a position of being left behind, so they frantically worked on building a DC-8 that looked an awful lot like a 707. They stole each other's ideas, and away we went with two competing airlines and two competing aircraft manufacturers here in the United States. Luxury and time sold. It was a nice deal to take jet travel. It was great. It was luxurious. It was fun. Above the weather. 9 hours to Europe, 5 hours coast to coast, everything you could want, premium service. At that time, every seat was business class. Every seat. Okay? And it had great business value because you were saving time. And it was all due to the jet engine. Tom, you here? Why is there a spiral on the nose of that engine?
Bird strike.
There you go. You remembered from last year.
Yep.
Right. It was the engine that actually was most successful in closing the gap in not only terms of speed but altitude as well. And it was all about the engine. In 1970, there was not a single aeronautical engineer, male, who did not have this poster hanging in their office. What happened was PSA figured out something that nobody else could figure out. And that was, if I've got all these business travelers and I want to attract them and I want to steal them away from other airlines, then I had to have a shtick, and sex sells seats. And with short shorts and nice uniforms and great legs, they filled the airplanes. And it was almost 30 years worth of this, up to about 1990, that sex was selling. And if you don't believe it, let me give you a few examples.
Yep.
Okay? Well, enough said there. This is kind of interesting. The one on the left is Lufthansa, and the small print says short lines, smooth planes, round the world experience on every flight. Okay? The one on the right says experience makes the difference. This is Pan Am's poster for Rio.
Wow.
Okay? So if there's any doubt, I'll give you one more. For those of us that are old enough, we loved national airlines, right? Right? So sex sold, and a lot of people got on it. Why? Because of the business traveler. Why? Because that business traveler was the price differential and the profit margin for that airline. Well, luxury's death knell came in the 90s when a couple of things happened. One is we had deregulation, of course, but we also had a tremendous amount of competition. There were lots of startup airlines, low-cost airlines, labor management problems, needed to have higher pay, higher structures, delays were killing everybody. It created a culture of the passenger where they expected and experienced delay, and they got used to that problem. The waiting, the lines, okay? So when 2011 happened, or 2001 happened, 9/11, and all this security stuff came in, we all accepted it. We were all lemmings in this process. Here's a list of the airlines in the United States that were either consolidated or went bankrupt. I'm sure you can find one that you've probably flown on. A lot of them went by the wayside. And in this consolidation, it was because they couldn't compete in the marketplace. All right, so let's talk a little bit about airline economics as they sit today so that you have a better understanding of why you are a lemming. Here's the picture of the operating revenues, and I've gone back to 2000. So right before 9/11, gone back to 2000. And you can see that, you know, from a revenue standpoint, in 2011, we're not much different than we were in 2000. So 12 years worth of so-so business. Out of those 12 years, 5 of them, they lost money. The airlines as a group lost money. Their profit margin is only 4%. I don't think that any of you work for a company whose profit margin is that low. The whole airline business is one of cash flow. Now, the other thing that's kind of interesting is if you look at available seat miles versus revenue passenger miles, what you see is the top line on the top is seats flown. Line on the bottom is seats flown filled. That delta is some 300 million seats a year for U.S. carriers, and it hasn't changed. You would have expected that the gap between available and actual filled seats would have gotten narrower and narrower over time, and that's something that I can't explain. Maybe it's consolidation of routes. There's all kinds of things that went into it. Okay, but the load factor went up. This means there's more people on the airplane. In 2006, the break-even point for some of these airlines was as high as 86%. I had to have 86% of my seats filled to make any money. And that was because of labor costs and fuel and everything else. And you don't make much money unless those airplanes are absolutely packed. Fuel consumption has gone down nationally in terms of total consumption, and these numbers look really good, primarily attributable to 2 things: less flying and better engines. Okay? And you can see the impact of 9/11. Now, these little numbers across the bottom we're going to come back to, but these little numbers represent the per gallon cost of fuel for that year. Here it is. A big difference between 78 cents on one end and $2.86 a gallon on the other end. So fuel efficiency is a big deal. You earn your way on the airplane by saving gas through efficiency. The airlines don't care about environmental. They care about saving gas. That's the argument you make with the airlines. Now, you want to go talk to the Bird and Bunny folks, you talk about NOx and emissions and things like that. But the bottom line is, you sell something by saving gas. All right. So the airlines today, it's very difficult for them to discriminate on prices. And the reason for that is the internet. The internet has caused all of us to be very smart consumers. But we're not buying luxury, we're buying miles in the air. We look for the cheapest fare. It used to be that the business traveler was the profit margin. Now, business departments are saying, let's see what we can get on a last-minute flight, and let's get the cheapest. And you're starting to see more and more business travelers who will do the practice of flying on a flight segment, tearing up the rest of their ticket, and they've scheduled themselves on another flight segment, and they tear up the other part of that ticket, and so they end up with buying or reserving seats on like 6 airplanes to complete 2 flights. That's one of the reasons why the available passenger mile seat level is so high. Think of all the times you've been on an airplane and you got standbys. And what happens to you when you're on standby? They can usually accommodate you because they got all those extra seats that they don't tell you about. Well, we're all price sensitive now, and there's no much product definition. You can't, some people say, well, geez, have you ever flown on Virgin America? Yes, it's a wonderful experience. I can get the same experience by flying on Lufthansa, higher cost. But I can't differentiate without having to pay for it. And I don't want to pay for it. I'm the consumer and I don't care anymore. The same thing has happened with some of the passenger reward programs. It used to be if you were a preferred member of an airline, you got to load early. Now there's 6 or 7 categories of people who are in different preferred programs who get to load early. And why do they want to load early? So they can take that bag that they're carrying and stuff it in a hole someplace. Right? And so some airlines, Spirit and Allegiant, are now going to start charging you $25 for your carry-on baggage. And I'm going to show you why in just a moment. So we're starting to see a little bit of this Lemming stuff go to luxury, and then we're starting to see an economy plus. For a few dollars extra, you can get the legroom of the emergency seat. For a little bit extra, you get business class amenities, and you get some business class pricing. And that's about the only way you're going to feel comfortable flying. But if you're back in coach with me, forget it. Another thing that's happened. It used to be you had an affinity card for a particular airline, and you tried everything possible to convince your travel department that you had to fly on United or Delta or Continental or somebody like that. And that differentiation kept you. And you became a loyal customer, and you got benefit from being that loyal customer. The next thing that the airlines did was they said, well, geez, you know, this program is going so well, maybe we should expand it. So they added Hilton Honors, and they added budget rent-a-car and Hertz and everything else, and I could get frequent flyer miles on that, and it was credited to my account with my airline because I had the card. The banks look at this and they say, geez, what a tremendous opportunity. They go to the airlines, and they tell the airlines this story. How about I give you money up front against future airline miles, and your affinity card can now become our credit card. They did that. Of course, every airline did that. And then what happened was Capital One comes along and says, hey, wait a minute. What the hell do we care which airline we're loyal to? We'll get frequent flyer miles, and we'll do it that way. What the airline did was lost the affinity of the customer. So economically it's good, but it doesn't keep you in that seat. Okay. Enough said on that one. Last year, the airlines collected $2.5 billion in baggage fees. In 2007, when it was first reported to the Bureau of Transportation Statistics, it was a little over 470,000. So if you look at that and you say $2.5 billion, $25 to $35 per bag, that's all profit. It costs between $4 and $7 to move your bag through the system. So that's all profit to them. So if you think about that $6 billion profit the airlines had in 2011, and $2.5 billion of it is your baggage fees, and oh, by the way, there isn't any tax paid on that, and oh, by the way, there's no payment to the trust fund for that amount of money, I can use that to offset my ticket prices and bring them lower so that when you look on the internet, you're going to go to my airline. Okay? So, more legroom, I'll add a fee. Early boarding, $10. I'll increase the thresholds on points to discriminate. So instead of 20,000 for a free flight, 35,000. Right? Wouldn't it be interesting if every American in the country decided on one day of the week that would be frequent flyer day? The airline would make no money at all on that day, and they would just walk down on the miles. I have a cousin who's got 4 million miles on United. Boy, do they treat him well. Okay? And he's got his own concierge, 24/7. He calls this number. I want to go flying? He goes flying. Because they're trying to get his mileage down.
Liability.
So you're getting great value on travel, but you're not having a great experience. It's going to cost you to enjoy that flight. So basically the bottom line is it possible to save us from ourselves? We created this problem for the airlines. We created it by having access to ticketing through the internet. We created it by demanding the lowest possible price. Yesterday I checked for a flight to LA from Washington, D.C., $420. I can't drive to Washington, D.C. for $420 in gas. I can't do it. Okay? It was a nonstop flight. So when you look at those schedules, you'll notice that they really got crappy times, and they really got lots of stops that you didn't want to make along the way, and you're going, somebody said that they came here via Dallas and then via Atlanta and then up to Dulles, you know. They do that to fill up their airplanes to get the load factors they need, and that's why those seat prices are lower price in the internet screen. But in the end, what you do is you make a judgment. You say to yourself, I'm not going to do that. This is just too painful to do 3 flights for something I just want to go, so I'm going to go direct. And when you get down to the direct, lo and behold, it costs more. Service isn't any better, but it costs more. So we have reached a point where we have met the enemy, and he is us, because we are demanding this type of cruddy service. They're responding to our demands. You're asking for cheap. You're getting cheap. Okay? So if you don't want cheap, you're going to have to pay for that experience. And you have to look at your travel not just as distance for the lowest cost, but you have to look at your travel in terms of what kind of experience do I want to have. How many of you used to take your computer on the airplane and your laptop on the airplane and work on the airplane? Okay. Can't do it anymore, can you? You don't have enough room to open it up, right? So what happens? You buy an iPad. Okay? You still work on it. And eventually, Apple's going to sell you a smaller iPad. Right? And because they sell you smaller PCs, basically. So your entire existence is dependent upon how well you love being packed in like a sardine in that airplane seat. Okay? So my only suggestion to you is realize what the pressures are on the airline. Their profit margin is slow and low. They've got tremendous price sensitivities. Best equipped, best served is sold under 2 ways. One is I can save some gas so it's more efficient, or I can beat my competition. Alaska Airlines, for example, when they had heads-up displays on all their aircraft operating out of Seattle, got foggy, they were the only aircraft that departed. They advertised that. They said, on-time performance out of Seattle, fog or no. And so if you can find a discriminator, you can sell. If you can find a way to save them money, you can sell. Okay? The altruistic business of trying to make the world a better place by using RNAV and ADS-B in applications doesn't wash when the airlines are fighting this type of a problem. Okay? So the advice I would give you as we leave here is sit in the airline seat for a moment as you prepare your PowerPoint briefing to go sell them something, and realize the pressures that they're under. Okay? Their CFO will tell you, I need to get my money back in 12 months, 18 months maybe. And the reason for that is their cash flow problem. That's why they like this public-private partnership. Get some money up front, kind of helps to ease my way. With that, I'm going to do something that I've never been able to do in a conference before. I'm going to be your host and invite you in for more food and drink right next door. Thank you very much.
Just 1 second. I'd like to present you with a little token of appreciation here.
Geez, another piece of plastic.
Yeah,
What a deal.
cool. Out of the